Cool. So I'm going to be talking about data and deliverability today. We're going to kind of kick off with a bit of a look at database hygiene, basically what it is, what we can do. I'm going to give you a couple of tips and tricks around uploading lists and managing them before we get into the wonderfully dark, dull, boring world of email deliverability, and a few tips and tricks on that. Now, my GIF game is not nearly as strong as Grace's, but I've tried my best by sticking to a particular theme. That theme is Star Trek, so enjoy. So data, and more data. Space is not the final frontier for the large majority of us. It's probably our databases. We often treat them as these big, scary black holes that we're never going to return from if we kind of enter into it. But given the right tools and the right techniques, you won't have any trouble with tribbles. So we're going to start off with segmentation. Segmentation is essentially figuring out who your audiences are. It's basically just by defining the bits of segments based on criteria within your actual database. So as a couple of examples, some of them could be, your segmentation could be industry, or your segment could be something like real estate, software and technology. I've got one there for region, as well as persona. This is not obviously an exhaustive list, this is just a couple of recommendations or a couple of options that you can kind of go for. So why do we use segmentation? Segments within Marketo are frequently used across dynamic content within your emails, landing pages, and essentially allow marketers to develop various messages for targeting specific audiences. Some of the things to note, however, is that a lead can only exist within one segment in a single segmentation. What that essentially means is if I've got, say, a segment called region with EMEA, APAC, sort of North America, it means I can only exist in one of those segments. So I can exist in APAC or in EMEA or in North America. I can't exist in multiple in Marketo, I can only exist in one. Priority order determines membership. So in that same example, if my segments are in order of North America, EMEA, and then APAC, if my criteria in Marketo means that I could join possibly two of them, so EMEA and North America, for whatever reason, whatever the first segment in that structural list is, I will appear in that one and no other. Marketo limits you to 20 segmentations with 100 segments within each of those 20. Something to be extra concerned with is that if you use workspaces, that's 20 segmentations across all of your workspaces, just to make things a little bit trickier. So how do we look at creating segments? It's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. Under database, you just need to right-click on segmentations and then select new segmentation. You then just need to name your segmentation, add your segments, and then define what they actually are. You can drag and drop them. You can't quite see it on here, it's a bit fuzzy, but just by using this little option here, this is where you can kind of drag and drop them into the order or the structure that you want them to be in. So that's what that priority order actually references. Before then, you just need to click create, and then you need to add in your smart list criteria. So these are the rules, the filters that you're going to use to define what your segments actually are. After that, you just need to right-click on the segmentation and approve it. And then Marketo will run the rules and make sure that people are sitting in the right segment. Email bouncers. They are not as fun as bouncy castles. They are split into two different types within Marketo. We call them hard bouncers and soft bouncers. Hard bouncers are generally where there's a permanent issue with the email. So a hard bouncer will occur when a mail server tells Marketo that an email can't be delivered to the address. Often that could mean something like the email address no longer exists. Person's left the company, that email address has been shut down. Soft bouncers generally occur as a temporary issue. So they kind of mean that something's gone wrong with the delivery to the person's inbox. They will often get resolved, but that can take a few days. When I say temporary, it could be something such as the email inbox might just be full. Now, bounces might sound a bit scary, but the reason I'm kind of going over this is that they do play a bit of a large role in how some email platforms actually determine whether an email should be hitting the inbox or not. Marketo will automatically manage some of your bounces automatically, but not all of them. What happens if I kind of just ignore them? Well, you're kind of going to end up with some bad sender reputation. If those bounces keep stacking up, and if you're not doing anything to manage them, that's going to mean that your email deliverability, or the chance that your emails are hitting the inbox, is going to start going down. You're going to have poor inbox placement, so some browsers, particularly web-based ones, will start off by putting delays on your deliverability, on emails hitting the inbox, before sort of just stopping them altogether. And worst case scenario is getting blacklisted, which is what you want to avoid.
Why is it only some?
The reason it's some is, so this article here kind of goes into, I'm not going to go into how to build out sort of programs to manage bounces within this, mostly because I would be here for hours if we did. Because Marketo has, I think from memory, there's about 20 to 30 different bounce codes. And each of those bounce codes represents the different way that email gateway, which we'll get onto, kind of pushes an email back to Marketo to sort of go, something went wrong, here's the error code. Marketo does have a way to manage some of those, but not all of them. Mostly because if it was going to automatically manage all of them for you, then you'd probably end up, all of your bounces would just be marked as invalid, which is not what we want. This post here is a fantastic post. It's definitely at a kind of an intermediate level. So if you do have a decent understanding of how Marketo works, especially how bounces, kind of a vague understanding of how bounces work, this will be fine. If you're brand new to Marketo, this will be a bit of a struggle, but have a bit of a look. It's a really good way. It breaks down how each of the error codes operate and how you can create programs to manage each of those error codes. So make it so. Email engagement. So when I'm talking about email engagement, I'm talking about leads. So engagement is everything. Low engagement within your emails, so your open rates, your click rates, will end up leading to poor email deliverability. So you want to make sure that your emails are getting your higher open rates, your high click rates. The second that they start dropping, that will start to play a bit of have an impact on your email delivery. Now, while the size of your database is important, it's what you do with it that counts. What does this mean? Basically, much the same as what we've just spoken about with bounces, is that inbox filtering kind of comes into it, especially with things like Gmail, where if you start engaging with emails less and less, Gmail starts prioritizing your emails in a different fashion. So it starts moving them to different folders before moving it to the spam folder. So focusing on engagement is key. You want to make sure that you're targeting the correct audiences with the right content at the right time. So much to what Grace was talking about before, A/B testing. What we're going to be touching on now, though, is how to look at identifying unengaged leads within Marketo and then marketing suspend them. Now, the reason we want to do this is so that we are dealing with a clean audience of only those recipients who have been engaging. So this is something that I generally do in a lot of my clients' accounts, where I set an operational program up to look at identifying these leads who haven't been engaging with emails, with forms, with lead generation activity in a period of time, say 6 months. I mark them as marketing suspended while I figure out what to do with them. So the first step I've got here is this is just a smart campaign that I've created. My smart list is where I've got a bunch of different filters. You can use as many filters as you want to determine or define what engagement is. So you can see, it's a little bit blurry, but what I've kind of got in here are things like not visited web page, not opened email, not clicked a link in email, not filled out form. So this is not an exhaustive list. Again, this is just a couple of, a quick snapshot of some of the rules that I kind of put in here. You get to define what that looks like for you. My period of time is a 6-month period as far as for generally my clients who are sending a lot of emails quite frequently. I want to kind of shorten that down to a 6-month period. So if no one has done any of these activities in 6 months, I want to mark them as marketing suspended. The reason I want to do this over an unsubscribe is it makes it easier for me to identify who these audiences are, especially when I'm putting in a marketing suspended reason to actually date stamp that action and sort of list what it is or the reason why I've kind of done that. The biggest reason I'm doing that is so that it gives me a bit of time to look at formulating a re-engagements plan, which is where we're at with the next steps. So we're not going to be deleting these leads. We're not unsubscribing these leads. All I'm doing is suspending them so that I can formulate that plan. Communicate with these leads via other channels. Email's just not right for them, so try them on LinkedIn, try them on Facebook, try them on other sort of forums. Email's just not working for them at the moment. But that doesn't mean you should be looking at creating or developing a re-engagement plan. That can include email over time. I do this for clients where we use Facebook and LinkedIn to try and get them back on board by filling up their profiles. Tips and tricks, uploading lists. When you guys are uploading your lists, how often are you, or how many of you are actually on a frequent basis, having to manually match the column headers in your spreadsheet to fields that exist within Marketo?
It happens randomly.
Randomly? Yep.
Kind of similar, yeah.
Yeah.
Every second, third time.
Cool. What we're going to talk about here are import aliases. Import aliases make your life a hell of a lot easier if you're uploading lists on a frequent basis, like what I'm having to do if I'm, say, exporting data out of Facebook and having to manually import that at the moment. Import aliases make life easy. So I'm using date of birth as an example through here. You'll see back on my previous example, what I've had to do over here is manually match DOB in my spreadsheet to the date of birth field in Marketo. I've had to manually select that. By coming in here through to import aliases, they allow me to automatically set up and match these variables, these unique variables in my spreadsheet, to a field that already exists in Marketo. So I can do that by going to field management under admin, finding my field, and then clicking on the field actions and then coming down to edit import aliases. What I've done is I've come in here and I've added DOB and D.O.B as different variables in here. These are the fields as they appear as headers in my spreadsheet. What this means is the next time that I upload this, my spreadsheet into Marketo, it should automatically match what I see here on this tab over here, so DOB into date of birth for me, so I no longer have to match that automatically. I don't have to manually match that. One tip though is you need to be careful with Marketo and Salesforce or your CRM's system fields. The last thing you want to be doing is trying to get Marketo to try and automatically override, or for Marketo to automatically override fields like Marketo ID, which are crucial and key for the application. So focus mostly on any fields that you happen to create, or not system fields. Email deliverability. There's no avoiding it. It is an overly complex topic. We're only going to be scratching the surface over here. We're going to have to do it. Resistance is futile. So what is email deliverability? Basically, if an email is accepted by an email gateway, which we will be covering off, Marketo will kind of consider this as delivered. This is one part of the reporting that we get in Marketo, and it's one part of what we define overall as email deliverability. However, this may not necessarily mean it has hit the inbox. So an email still has a number of various fields to look at navigating before it actually hits the email inbox. So when we're talking about email deliverability, what we're actually talking about is inbox placement. Okay? What we're going to be talking about shortly are the different parts of this graph here. So we're going to start off by having a quick look at what an email gateway actually is, what it does and why it's important, and then having a quick look at spam filters and again, what they do and why they're important. The key thing to note here is that Marketo reports up to this point here. So whenever you're looking at your email engagement reports and you see a delivery rate of 98%, what Marketo is telling you is that 98% of those emails were accepted by a gateway. but that's as far as it can see. It can't see past that. It can't see if the email actually made it past any filtering by the gateway. It can't see if it had made it past any spam filtering to hit the inbox. It can only say it was accepted by the gateway. That's it. So that's what we kind of see as Marketo side. We need to kind of figure out what happens after that. So what is a gateway? A gateway is a gatekeeper. It's a server that will process all of your emails. For incoming emails, the gateway will typically process it, such as for things like checking it for viruses, making sure that the email is authenticated, and just determine whether or not the email is safe to pass through to the next stage. It's trying to save you. What is the spam filter? These are pieces of technology or software that use a whole bunch of algorithms and heuristics. The algorithms essentially tell a filter what to do, while the heuristics essentially run the email through thousands of these algorithms, which then go ahead and apply a score, which will total up to determine the probability of whether or not the email is spam. So essentially, between these two kind of things, that's what's going to help to determine whether or not the email is going to hit the inbox. What we now need to quickly talk about is the difference between delivered and deliverability. It can get a little bit confusing, so I do need you to kind of just trust me on this one. But email delivery is the number of emails accepted by the gateway divided by the total number of emails sent. This is like what I just said before. This is what Marketo will show you. So when you see the delivered stats in an email report, this is what you see. Email deliverability is the number of emails delivered to the inbox divided by the total number of emails sent. So these are emails who have made it past the gateway and past the spam filters. What this means is that delivered does not necessarily mean inbox placement. Cool. So what does this mean? What this means is that email deliverability is a really tricky beast to try and navigate. The email ecosystem is constantly changing, and it's becoming harder and harder for us to actually make sure that our emails are hitting the inbox. Marketo only tracks one part of this, but there are other tools out there to help support tracking of inbox placement. So things like 250OK, return path, and various others. Email filters are constantly changing. They're always changing, mostly to try and combat the latest sort of malware and phishing campaigns that are out there. And then we've also got new laws and legislation to combat. So think of things like GDPR and then the Canadian anti-spam legislation that came through in the last couple of years. These changes mean that we've got to kind of change how we think about our lead generation practice, how we're capturing leads, and what we do with them off the back end of that. And then new technologies and UI changes are constantly adjusting the landscape, like Gmail, which is my favorite. Cool. So what happens if I get this wrong? You're going to struggle getting your emails in the inbox, plain and simple. That's going to be the biggest difficulty that you've got. That could mean you're going to have delays. I know that a lot of web-based ones in particular like to put a bit of a delay on emails hitting the inbox if it starts to pick up a few issues, as a sort of a, hey, you should deal with something here. You're going to end up with a few failed deliveries, so that just means that the emails will stop at the gateway. They won't make it any further, so you'll see your bounce rates start to skyrocket. And again, you could get blacklisted, which is your big red alert. We want to avoid that where we can. Blacklisted emails are really hard to fix.
So when you say, sorry, just to clarify, so when you say blacklisted,
Yep.
that would be company A trying to send to a Hotmail account.
Yep.
Hotmail has just gone.
Yep. So it means that, yeah, so it's something that the biggest one that we have to deal with here in New Zealand, which is quite common, is Extra. Because Extra just keeps getting bought out and changing hands all the time, it means that new rules keep going into place, which means we've got to kind of navigate that and figure out what it is that they're looking for. It means that we've got to be very careful, because if all of a sudden they go, whoa, you are sending too many emails, we don't know who you are, we're just going to start blocking you. which means if that might have just impacted initially 20% of the database, if they at that point decide no more, 100% of all emails that you try and send to Extra, you're not going to have any luck. They will never make it to the inbox.
And you don't necessarily get that reporting through
No.
Marketo, because I've discovered with a previous client I worked on once, Hotmail out.
Yep.
And the only way we found that was through the testing we were doing.
Yep.
Because nothing, it was all saying delivered, but nothing made it through.
Yep.
And there is no, there's so much you've got to do behind the scenes to restore that. But
There is. It's very, very difficult to try and fix a
Yeah.
blacklisted account.
Can I just add, so Extra or Yahoo, that you call that a local blacklist, so blacklisted by that domain, but there's also blacklists which apply industry-wide.
Yes.
Sorbs is an example, where so there's a number of them where your reputation drops to such a level and you get blacklisted on one or more of these lists.
Yeah.
And a lot of the spam filtering technologies tie
checking
into
those.
those to not necessarily not get your mail delivered, but it definitely considers whether
Yep.
that and the whole spam filtering.
Becomes
Yep.
a factor in that.
Yeah.
Hugely so.
Yeah.
So sorry, sending sample emails.
Yep.
So we've had one of the girls at work, she said they stopped coming through, you can see they were delivered, but she's making adjustments and sending the same email to her address like 6 times. Would it stop sending through at some
Is
point?
she sending them as a sample or sending them through? One of the things you do see often is people are trying to test things by using a smart campaign to try to populate things that wouldn't otherwise come through, and then people forget about communication limits.
Yep.
So that can be a trap.
that's-
But
Robots only.
yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
sample email should-
There's also Gmail, for example, treats reputation at an individual level. So if you're getting a lot of mail from the same sender and not opening and clicking them, then Gmail will start moving those emails
Yep.
into bulk folder.
Yeah. Which email do you guys use work-wise? Which sort of email platform? Do you use Gmail? Do you use Outlook?
Combination.
Combination, right.
So I try users to send it to their personal email.
Yeah. Sometimes your email, your email manager could sit there and go, as in the actual software itself could sit there and go, wait, I didn't send this email, but it's coming in from at European Motors, whatever, .co.nz, whatever that domain happens to be. So it goes, because I didn't send this, I'm not going to send this through anymore. There are some ways around that, but it could be a various number of different things like that, yeah. So how do I know if I have a problem? What I'm trying to focus on here are, how do I know if I've got a problem without spending a lot of money? So what can I do in Marketo? So the first thing is to focus and pay attention to your engagement rates. If you suddenly, if you went from 30% consistent open rate down to a 24% open rate over sort of the space of a couple of months, that's a trend. Look into it, dig into it. Monitor your bounces, look for trends, look for spikes. That pays, that's for both hard and soft bounces. You want to be keeping a really close eye on those. I'd suggest creating reports that kind of track that behaviour over sort of a month and weekly basis and create an internal reporting process that kind of manages that. So just like that there, so create reports and smart lists that focus on sender domains as well. When Grace was talking about knowing, building emails, knowing what your database build-up is like, so Gmail, what your split is like, you want to create smart lists based on that and reports based on that as well, so that you can easily identify how Gmail's performing, how Outlook's performing, how Yahoo's performing, how Extra's performing, and so on. You want to check those email engagement reports for drops in those delivery rates, and you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on your sender score, or your sender reputation through things like SenderScore. SenderScore.org is a free tool that you can use. If you register, which costs nothing, you get a more detailed report and a breakdown of any particular issues. This kind of gives you a random, well not a random, but a score, much like what spam filtering does, gives you a score based on what your reputation is. You want to keep that high. Generally, anything above 95 is fantastic. If you're in that 90 to 95, you've got a little bit of work done. If you're below 90, you've got a lot of work that needs to be done. But one thing to keep in mind is that a high score does not necessarily mean you're automatically going to get into an inbox. But it's a really important tool, really good tool. So how do I make sure that I get it right? The first thing is don't buy data, ever. For starters, it's illegal here. If you're caught buying data, you're in trouble. The second thing there is you don't want to be sending from multiple IP addresses. So if you've got a Marketo account that one team are using and a MailChimp account over here that another team are using, and then a third other tool over here that another team are using, that's going to mean you're going to start having issues. You want to try and limit that down to as few IPs as you are possibly sending from. The more of them that you're sending from, the more difficulties you will likely to encounter. You want to show consistency in your send volumes. What I mean here is you don't want to be sending 300,000 emails one month and then 50 the next, and then 40,000 the next month, and then 2 the following. You want to keep that consistent. So make sure that you've got programs and nurture programs that are constantly up and running, that are sending similar volumes out. You want to ensure that your emails are authenticated. This I won't go into too much detail, but there are many different types of authentication. 2 of the more common ones that you'll spot that your emails should have are SPF and DKIM. These are easily set up within Marketo, and Marketo has some fantastic guides to walk you through how to look at processing this and setting this up with your internal IT teams and things. You want to monitor your IP reputation through SenderScore. Keep your subscribers engaged, and make sure all of your emails are built correctly based on everything that Grace was talking about before. So tips and tricks on how to get into the inbox. Get permission. If your leads don't have permission, you're going to start having trouble with deliverability. I would say focus on how, as a perfect example, look towards Canadian anti-spam legislation for how to build out a lead capture or a lead, how your database should be managing leads from a permission standpoint. If you're building to that, you're not going to have any troubles. Actively manage your data. So everything that we've just spoken about in terms of building segments, bounce handling, unengaged leads and filtering them out, keep on top of that. The sooner that kind of lets slip, that's when you're going to start encountering a few issues. Build for legislation. So like I just mentioned before, build for the strictest legislation. So out there in the market, GDPR and CASL are the 2 strongest legislation that kind of focus on permission and privacy. If you're building your lead generation models, your subscription models, your preference center models based on those bits of legislation, you shouldn't have any troubles. Focus on engagement. I cannot say that enough. Invest in technology. This doesn't have to be a huge expense. This could just mean investing in 1 or 2 tools to help you out. This could just mean spending a little bit more money on getting an agency or an organisation to help you make sure your emails are authenticated correctly. You want to just spend a little bit of money, goes a long way with this kind of work. But most importantly, you want to honour the unsubscribe. You want people to unsubscribe from your emails. Make it easy for them. That is me. For everyone who did not like my Star Trek gifs, for everyone else, live long and prosper.